One of the most poignant Klan paintings is called Studio, and it's a hooded figure in an artist's studio doing a self-portrait of this hooded figure. Well, who do we think that is? Does it take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is the artist? This is Guston. And what is Guston saying then? Why is he wearing a hood? What Guston is perhaps saying to himself and to his audience is that you don't really fulfill your relationship to society until you take your mask off. You know, you can go in your studio and hide, you can paint masks, you can wear masks, but you don't begin to communicate with people until you take the mask off. And of course, the work after 1970, he removes the mask. And who's under the hood? Philip Guston.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Singh, and I'm going to start off with the topic, the internationalized art world. During the early 1870s, we can see that the artists were highly influenced by the style of America's art, so much that the Europeans became annoyed with the overused art style. They were bored with the production of artworks that showed the same abstract visuals, and due to the excess use of this style, they created a change in the art world. Instead of abstract painting, they wanted painting that brought them back to the stories they lived through. These paintings should ultimately bring these individuals to a state of reflection of their past. The shift from Americanized art was a big movement, in particular for European artists. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, these artists began to display artwork that represented their own culture. They wanted to reconnect with who they were. They urged for familiarity, and with this familiarity came their culture. Many of the artwork at this time reflects their cultural past. They advocated a change in the art world. Instead of abstract paintings, they wanted paintings that brought them back to the stories they lived through, paintings that would challenge individuals to have deep thought upon the hardships in their society. This shift that started in the late 1970s is known as Neo-Expressionism. The shift from Americanized art to Neo-Expressionism was led by a group of artists that rejected abstraction for highly expressive paintings with recognizable subject matter. They wanted paintings that touched upon their very own society and the stories they lived through. They wanted familiarity, which was their hardships during their times. Most paintings at this time lack pictorial idealization, but at the same time communicates a sense of disturbance, tension, alienation, and ambiguity.
Now, the final movement in this series, we're dealing with Neo-Expressionism. And Neo-Expressionism is really a reaction against some of the abstraction that we see in the 1980s. They're looking for more concrete forms. They're looking for more figurative art. And we're going to see a lot of market forces involved in this movement. So let's start with our definition. Neo-Expressionism is a diverse art movement that dominated the art market in Europe and the United States during the early to mid-1980s. And it's comprised of a variety of young artists who had returned to portraying the human body and other recognizable objects in reaction to the remote, introverted, highly intellectualized abstract art production of the 1970s. So this is a reaction back towards the human form. The movement was linked to, and in part generated by, new and aggressive methods of salesmanship, media promotion, and marketing on the part of dealers and galleries. So like I said, there's a big market side to this. Now, Neo-Expressionist paintings, though diverse, presented certain common traits. Among these were a rejection of traditional standards of composition and design, an ambivalent and often brittle emotional tone that reflected contemporary urban life and values, a general lack of concern for pictorial idealization. They will use vivid but jarring banal color harmonies, and a simultaneously tense and playful presentation of objects in the primitivist manner that communicates a sense of inner disturbance, tension, alienation, and ambiguity. Hence the term neo-expressionist to describe this approach, because they're going back to a lot of those expressionist ideas. Neo-expressionism is going to be controversial, both in the quality of its art products and in highly commercialized aspects of its presentation to the art-buying public. This is a time in the 1980s where the idea of collecting art as an investment is really taking off, and so we're seeing those market forces at play, galleries competing with one another to pay more to the artist trying to get involved in the media for the first time. Now, to us, this is nothing new. After all, we live in an age of Insta-Snap-a-Chatogram, where artists are expected to put their art out there to really push their forms. But if you go back, a lot of the artists that we dealt with, say in the early 20th century, weren't interested in marketing. That was for the galleries to deal with. They were interested simply in producing a piece. So now the artist is taking part in the promotion, and therefore we see some issues with neo-expressionism as some people see it.
Enzo was an artist during the start of Neo-Expressionism. He was an Italian painter who has a large scale of oil painting. As seen on the left of the slide, one of his paintings goes by the name Painting of the Precious Fires. This painting was created in 1983. Just by looking at this painting to see what we're looking at, we can find that this painting consists of vivid and dramatic colors. The use of the colors red and yellow intentionally gives the viewer an uneasy feeling because these colors are typically used for something that falls under the lines of terror. As we look closer, we can see two figures burning in the patches of fire, giving the viewer an inner sense of disturbance. Enzo created this oil painting in hopes of reflecting his dreams, his pre-Christian past, which is, in this case, reflects the rituals of the modern rural witch. Moving on to the second artist, George Bossuet was another important artist that shaped Neo-Expressionism. He was the creator of the painting The Great Friends. In this painting, we see two unproportional figures that lack pictorial idealization. We also see a fallen flag and a window with many other things that are on the ground. These two figures seem to be walking over this mess, and at the same time, the figure on the left is reaching their hand out. I take this as a gesture that ultimately communicates unity. It is important to know that this painting was, in fact, created after World War II, and Bossuet was most likely wanting to communicate the madness of this war. As we can see, these figures have smaller heads compared to their bodies. He may be expressing the ignorance of war, or he also may be expressing the need to be physically strong and mentally small in order to get through the experience of World War II. Overall, this is a very good example of Neo-Expressionism because it communicates hardships of being a soldier and how the German qualities were contaminated by the fallout of Nazism. To conclude my presentation, I would like to ask you to write down on a piece of paper how you think these two paintings fall under the definition of Neo-Expressionism.
Hello everyone, this is Jocelyn Estrada, and I'm going to discuss the shift in art during the late 1900s, specifically focusing on the influence of mass media during this time. Hollywood, public media, and the mass market were all new during this era and encouraged constant change and exposure to art styles unlike ever before. There was a desire for modernization with a shift toward appropriating and reworking traditional art styles. Much of the art created around the 1970s and 1980s was considered to be extremely risk-free, in the sense that it conformed to very limited experiences and fast-paced styles contrary to classical, long-lasting traditions. This was largely due to the fact that a new generation of artists raised with the television had the spotlight. I found a quote from the text particularly interesting because it perfectly defines the rapid changes that took place in the world of art as a result of the media, stating that, like television itself, rerun culture tends to erase the sense of being in a given place at a given time. It is both hungry for revivals and tormented by a sense of déjà vu, born of the total availability of all images. The TV was such an innovative and groundbreaking introduction to the world of technology, and with such advanced connection between individuals, there tends to be very little room for originality and mindfulness. Consequently, there becomes a high fixation on fame and divergence from the quickly outdated trends. This regurgitation of art introduced new designs such as pop art, which is commonly recognized in comics, and revolved around the new idea of appropriation. Artists did not attempt to steal or copy someone else's art, but rather quote it and add on one's own modern twist. New York was the center for art during this period, and although times were changing, there were still unique and worthwhile artists striving to make their mark. New artists began combining features of popular styles such as minimalism, expressionism, and abstract art. One of the main ambitions for many of these artists was to embody the pathos and evoke sentiment. Susan Rothenberg stood out for a reintroduction of expression. She painted up, down, around sometime between 1985 and 1987. The image seems to physically portray a body moving very loosely in correlation with the title, and the short, smeared brushstrokes gives an impressionist feel that provides a fuzzy vision of the picture, similar to how one sees when dizzy or moving fast. The title and posture of the figure suggest a repetitive motion that evokes a sense of endless misery or distress. Harriet Hodgkin follows the idea of art being autobiographical and a strive for familiarity. Dinner in Palazzo Albrisi was created sometime between 1984 and 1988, and his bold use of color in such a limited space elicits a sensuous and vibrant mood. The nostalgia and emotional conflict presented by these two paintings radiate two different energies, and yet encourage deep personal reflection and understanding. I would personally prefer Hodgkin's work in my own home. I appreciate the color splash just because it makes me feel good. Try reflecting on what you get from these two paintings and what you think the goal or message may be. What styles do they remind you most of? What would Western styles be without a focus on American culture and lifestyles? Different artists depicted different aspects of American life during the late 1900s, both the aesthetically pleasing and the ethically troubling. Hackney's photorealist painting would not have been a cause for excitement at its time, but his skill is evident in his craft of the splashing water. His choice of color and placement of objects within the frame creates a balance of stylization that emphasizes the good life of California. On the contrary, Fisher highlights the scandal of youth that tells a story of isolation, rebellion, and loneliness. He declares his theme to be the crisis of American identity, the failure of the American dream. His work stems from 1930s realism and aims to expose the truth behind American culture and its tension between generations and communities, leading to poor choices and poor living conditions. His painting Bad Boy highlights these points by depicting the reality of youth as packed with tension, irresponsibility, and erotic misery. These images portray two completely different worlds, and yet seeing them right next to each other makes me imagine Fisher's scene taking place inside the home in Hockney's scene. It is that very point that Fischl tries to make, that things are not always what they seem. For this section, I will be using 3 different artists with 3 very different depictions of the body. I will provide you with the name and description of the artist's style and work, and you decide whether painting A, B, or C is theirs. The first is Philip Pearlstein. Philip Pearlstein paints studio nudes and usually has parts of the body cropped by the canvas edge like a photo. He has sharp and intense visuals with dry colors. Secondly is Frank Auerbach, and he focuses on all observed facts, including posture, expression, and configuration. His paintings are a process of discovery, and he used densely piled paint in his earlier work. Lastly is Freud, and his work is known for its rawness and packed images. He gives his figures energetic shapes with action, while still paying attention to detail and intensity. Some of these might be a little tougher than others, but when you think you have your final decision, check out the last slide for the answers.
Please take a moment to review and go over our answers and discussion questions for the presentation. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.